Now, Madam Counsel, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly Commissioner Robinson jump in at any time, but I know that there was a fairly significantly attended meeting of a number of business owners and managers that are sort of in this area of District 4 there, the Davis Highway corridor, who have expressed some concerns about some behaviors that have been, really, I guess, have become a chronic problem in that area, in that part of the county, including some behavior which is clearly criminal, but some other things that are sort of some borderline behaviors, a lot of loitering, consumption of alcohol on public rights-of-way, aggressive panhandling type actions, and that sort of thing. Commissioner Robinson and the administrator, go ahead.
I would want to say we did have a really great, I see some of the neighbors out here, commercial neighbors on the Davis Highway area. This is also in the middle of that area we just talked about, CRA, but we are having problems. They were there, the sheriff's office was there. These discussions that the attorney is referencing came out of discussions that we did have with law enforcement, and in giving, and even though they're not here today, we do have some citizens, Mr. Chairman, if you wanted to, if we had the opportunity, certainly your discretion or whatever, but there are some citizens here to talk about if there are any questions about what has happened. But we did talk with them and with law enforcement, and so the recommendations being brought forward totally carry the weight of law enforcement. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted them to know we had talked with law enforcement on these issues.
Madam Counsel, Commissioner Robertson.
I'm just going to make a comment since we're on that. I've registered several complaints about the interstate at Pine Forest Road, and I've had hotels and restaurants and people that operate there that it's a real problem with them. Brent Lane, I think, out there by the interstate is in that area is probably the worst. I saw guys out in the center of the median with signs.
Which they're not allowed to do.
I know they're not. I mean, I've seen them with poles reaching way out so they don't have to cross into the right-of-way. But I'm telling you, when they're in the middle of the median out there, and surely we can get those folks removed, arrested, or otherwise. But I believe the biggest concentration, if we're going to really enhance and be more aggressive, is at interstate exchanges.
That's what we're going to tell.
If you just zero in on a 3 or 4, and that way the sheriff can. I mean, if you give him the whole county, they're not able to do it. But if you give them those interstate exchanges, I think it works.
That's one of the things we want to come to you today. That's what we really want to do. But I'll let.
So I would say that the potential solutions and some of the issues that were discussed go beyond simply panhandling. You're talking about some folks spending vast number of hours per day consuming alcohol on the bus benches. I mean, some behaviors that are not welcoming to the use of mass transit in that area, some things like that. So we looked at 3 things. One is whether or not we want to amend our existing open container ordinance. The ordinance as we currently have it is not especially strong, and frankly it's very rarely enforced. The only place it really ever is enforced is in some of the parking lots out on Pensacola Beach. So we could look at beefing it up to address some issues like consumption of open containers on public rights-of-way and some things like that. I know that we might want to look at some places where there are recreational activities and things like maybe out on the beaches where maybe you don't want to curb that activity, but there are some places like the rights-of-way along the roads and things like that where you may want to consider beefing up your ordinance. That is one thing that we can do. We also looked at loitering, and there is already a state statute that does address loitering. Loitering is one of the more difficult activities to curb just because of some constitutional protections, and really how do you define loitering. But there is already a state statute. There are a couple of counties that have enacted more stringent loitering requirements. My preference would be, since there's already a state statute and because there are so many constitutional concerns, you may want to shy away from that unless we just have to go there. And then the third thing is looking at our existing roadway safety ordinance, which does already prohibit people standing in medians, by the way, or going onto the road beds. So we did look at our existing roadway safety ordinance and our aggressive panhandling ordinance. And I think the only changes I would recommend to that is if you want to look at hitting the corridors coming off of I-10, you have to be very specific in how you define these areas, and we could look at doing something like that.
We did talk about like a half mile or a mile either side of, so that like Pine Forest and 10, half mile either side of 10 on Pine Forest, there would be a prohibition from panhandling.
This is so hard to enforce. We can put every ordinance on the books, and we saw that it hadn't helped since we passed these ordinances. You can't be out in the right of way. I want to ask Administrator or Attorney to at least look at that. You remember when we upped the handicap parking from 25 to 160? And that created the formation of what we call PEST, which are volunteers that have little trucks and they will go around and write all these citations. Could these citations and some of the control be handled by volunteers similar to that?
Please, no.
Huh?
No, no.
Well, they write citations for parking in a handicap parking.
The way these ordinances are, well, first of
Now,
all,
I'm not talking about open container and all. I'm talking about just seeing someone out in the middle of an interstate or a median.
No.
They couldn't write a citation?
No.
Well, how can we
No,
do it
first
in
of all-
parking lots for handicap parking?
well, you're not, this is people, not cars. It's a whole different ballgame. You're talking
What?
about.
No,
Is it the
the
subjectivity of the perception versus the car you can't dispute if they take a picture? You can document
Well-
the evidence. Is that?
Well, you got to show your card. You can't just have a handicap parking slot in a parking space, and if that person didn't actually have that issue to them, it is people. It's not just cars.
You're,
We're never going to get law enforcement to have the capacity to administer these ordinances because it's going on all over the county. And there's volunteers that test it so much that they would volunteer to go out and write citations.
well, part of these are misdemeanors, and you cannot have they just don't have the authority to do that. We can't have volunteers out detaining people and
Well, how about code enforcement?
no.
Commissioner Robinson?
I would like us to look at the open container changes to that policy to deal with stricter provisions to be able to allow people to address behavior we don't see as consistent that is happening. I would like to ask, in a way, I know I've talked with you, Madam Attorney, about not necessarily, much like we do now, we enforce it in the parking lot, but we don't enforce it on the actual beach. I know that's an area we don't want to get into, and we haven't had problems since we've created our alcohol-free section of the beach, and I don't even want to begin to just get into issues right now. So, however we can work that around, I'd like to see that
I'll
work.
coordinate with the attorney for the Island Authority.
And then the other issue is I would like to see an aggressive panhandling prohibition for a half mile on either side of I-10, north and south, at all the places where there are exits, and that would start from wherever the exit comes in from the interstate, and that would be a half mile to the north, and wherever it comes in on the south, a half mile to the south, so that you would quantify that whole area as a prohibition-free zone for panhandling, and it be illegal in that area to deal with public safety issues. Anybody's welcome to move outside of those areas. This would be 9 Mile, Pine Forest, 29, Davis, and
Brent Lane
Scenic,
Airport.
and Scenic. We're not talking about. We weren't so much talking about 110. If y'all would like us to add 110, we could add
110 for my
Okay.
driving is as
That's
bad
what
as
I-
anything
yeah,
else.
that's
Okay.
fine, yeah.
Well, then I would say we'd like to add 110 to this, and 110 and 10. So all those roads that have exits off of that, we would do that. Then you do east and west of 110. Can you do that, Madam Attorney?
I'll certainly start working on that.
Commissioner Robertson, I know your microphone wasn't working a second ago.
I'm all for it, but I can assure you without a lesser expensive or more involved enforcement than the Sheriff's Department, I mean, they're going to tell you, and I understand it, we have got more serious issues out here all over the county. I call Alana every now and then when I see one in the media particularly. I say, Alana, call the Sheriff's Department, please get them. I'm telling you, it is not going to be enforced. It's just not practical.
It does seem better as I was a commissioner. Well, three of us were actually lay people when the board passed the enhanced ordinance a few years ago. I don't remember exactly how long ago, but it, as a driver, it has seemed better than it was before. You still
may
have
be
your
better.
pockets.
But I still want to ask it one more time. code enforcement can go out and write citations for some pretty serious issues. They can't do this or help the sheriff's department.
These are criminal misdemeanors.
Well, when they go out and see some serious environmental issues and write a citation, some of those could be criminal.
The only thing under state law where code enforcement can be delegated some enforcement of state laws is the state litter law. These are misdemeanors. Now, if you don't want them to be
I
misdemeanors,
tell you, when they leave those corners and sites, it is littered. I can tell you that.
Commissioner May.
Well, they could recycle the beer cans. Allison, the lottering and the panhandling at our public libraries, are they under the same ordinance? And are we strengthening that? I mean, when we have our most precious asset chilled, and I understand, at these right-of-ways, but if a guy can hang outside we move him from the interstate or from these right-of-ways to the library, I mean, I think that causes even more problems. So,
Does it automatically include county property? That would seem, if it includes our right-of-way, does it?
the state loitering law could affect county rights-of-way, but how it would specifically apply to libraries, I would probably not want to just give an answer off the cuff. I can look at that more closely. I know loitering is one of the number one things that all public libraries struggle with.
Absolutely. But, I mean, if we're going to strengthen this, if we're going to address it, I just think that should be inclusive. I mean, that's one of the number one complaints we get by people going to our public libraries is that people are out loitering and panhandling. Yeah. And so if we're going to address it at the interstate, let's address it at the libraries as well.
Library facilities across the state struggle with these kinds of issues. Homeless people using the restrooms, loitering, all sorts of things like that are constant daily struggles that I know Darlene and I have mentioned in the past that they struggle with.
Well, kind of concurring with what Commissioner Robertson was just saying in terms of enforcement. I know our library systems, we have hired security and police officers that work there. So it seems to me if the ordinance was on the book, it'd be easily enforced at the library, much more so than we can, in the right-of-ways.
Commissioner Robbins.
Mr. Chairman and my other commissioners, law enforcement was at the meeting that we had this, and they specifically asked for these, especially the issue of the open container issue. They also would like a clear prohibition and of panhandling. In the audience, you have a couple of members, one of which has a State Farm agency there. That is dealing with these problems. The other one is a hotelier, and the hotelier can tell you there are people that are actually extorting guests for money when they're there. It has gotten to be so. It's not an isolated incident. It is almost a daily occurrence at which time people are doing this, and it is ruining. This is ruining business in that area. Nobody wants to stay somewhere where somebody's going to come up and extort them for money while they're staying there. And so this isn't like a harmless situation that's being identified. We have a real problem off the interstate. It sounds like, I didn't even know, Commissioner Robertson, you were having the same problem. It sounds like on some of those hotels off of Pine Forest. I think if we just create this prohibition and we try to move people outside that area, I think that's essential in code. And I will tell you, the sheriff's office they want these tools because they want to go after this situation. They realize what is happening and it's wrong. What's happening, almost the extortion that is happening at some of these hotels. But they were in the meeting and they were asking us to do these things. And so I told
Mr. Robinson, you're invading Mr. Leonard's time. I do recognize him in the audience. I'd be happy to let him talk if you don't mind. If my colleagues don't have an issue, I don't have an issue. If you'd like to hear from the two business owners, and I do recognize Joe, I believe.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's been a little while, but and I'm just picking with you.
Appreciate you taking this topic up. It is a major problem. Our big problem is one of education and the general public's misconception that these people are homeless. We have many churches. We have the Waterfront Mission there on Olive Road. We've got the Washburn Center down at Brent Lane. There is help available for homeless people. These people are not homeless. This is a business. They have a website they can access. It tells them what cities are panhandle friendly. They work 4-hour shifts. They have a straw boss with a clipboard on the side of the road that assigns the street corners. These people can make more on their shift than we make in a month, some cases. The sad thing is, and what I object to more than anything, is that they're preying on the charitable, kind-hearted, hard-working citizens of Escambia County by using props and preying on our emotions. They'll use crutches, wheelchairs, they'll wear Santa hats, they'll use their children. They'll use their dog with a bandana on it. I've watched them leave their corner at the end of their shift, walk to the parking lot in front of the grocery store, get in a brand new Toyota Tacoma and drive off. These are not new faces. They're the same people each and every day. We've had to deal with the safety concerns of having them defecate at our front door and our flower beds. They've put syringes for illicit drugs in the night drop in our office buildings where they can come back and retrieve it at a later time. You know, they'll stick the half pints of whiskey bottles in the rain gutter. Every time it rains, you hear all this pleasant jingling and jangling of empty bottles come rolling out in the parking lot. We've had issues with them pimping girls out behind the shopping center and the McDonald's. McDonald's had to close their lobby because of what was happening there. It's unsafe. The other thing is it's a blight for those people traveling the I-10 corridor to get off and this be their first impression of Pensacola, Florida, is terrible. Like I say, these guys are better organized than some unions. They know the law better than the majority of the citizens. They know exactly how far they can be. As Commissioner Robertson pointed out, they know they can't step off the curb to get money, but they will tell you to wad up that $5 bill and throw it at them. Okay, so to prevent being in violation of the law. What we need is an anti-panhandling ordinance, period. I don't understand why Santa Rosa County doesn't seem to have this problem. I don't know what Mobile, Alabama did to get rid of their problem, but it has a negative impact on business in our area, and if it impacts business negatively, it's going to impact jobs. But the big issue is safety. Customers are afraid to get out of their car and put a night drop of an insurance premium at my office because of people hanging around there. But why don't we just say no panhandling, period? And the law enforcement has been very helpful. I feel guilty of the few times I've called them for wasting their time when they should be doing, handling more serious issues. But they are vigilant, and every call that I've made, they've come up, they've been compassionate in dealing with the person. But it's an issue, and the law enforcement will tell me, say, Joe, they know the law better than we do.
Thank you, Joe. Commissioner Roberts.
Joe, you just described, and I didn't realize Commissioner Robinson was not aware of this, because the Country Inn and Suites and the Hampton Inn, and I could go over all those hotels and businesses out at Pine Forest and I-10. It's a nightmare. I'll be this drastic. Because enforcement, even if we made it countywide, I'd be happy with that. Just stop it altogether. Enforcement is a big issue. I would be more than happy to fund an extra $50,000 or $60,000 to the sheriff's department and hire a deputy that he didn't do anything but enforce panhandling. I'd be honestly happy to do that, because you're not going to take guys that are running out making calls for burglaries and serious crimes and divert them. It's just not going to happen. If you want to really make this work, you ought to have somebody, if the code enforcement can't do it, there ought to be a deputy assigned and just travel this county constantly doing nothing but enforcing panhandling.
All right, Mrs. Beck, if you'd like to come forward. Mrs. Beck has interest in the Holiday Inn, and as she comes up, Commissioner Underhill.
I think that the previous speaker, what he said with regard to the organized nature of this panhandling, and you did us all a great service to say out loud that this is not a homeless issue, and we, all the citizens of Escambia County, need to separate the homeless issue, which is something very important we need to address from this issue that we're discussing today, the industry of panhandling, the criminal industry of it. And it is because of that organized criminal industry nature of it is why I think it's dangerous to have anything other than a deputy handing out these citations, because you cannot be guaranteed that the situation will not escalate. If there was some way we could always guarantee the situation wouldn't escalate, then that's a great time for a volunteer. But this is, I think, firmly in the realm. This is serious enough that it should, in fact, be an armed and trained deputy handling that type of thing. Thank you. Sorry,
Mrs. Beck.
Hi. What Joe said, all of that is true. What we need to note is that since our last meeting, it's increased. As of yesterday, there were 22 in one location. As of yesterday morning at Holiday Inn, we put someone off our property who wasn't just panhandling like in the street. He was in the driveway, and as each guest left, he was blocking their entrance and then asking them for money. And for me personally, as we stated last time, I had one threaten to kill me as I approached and just parked my car on an opposite side of a fence on our property. So I think the seriousness of it isn't just a bunch of people hanging out. For us personally, again, at Holiday Inn, it's cost us almost $1 million in business in contracts with the airlines for 2014. If it continues, there will be a lot more people out on the street because all of us will be out of jobs.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Robertson.
Commissioner Underhill made a great point. I probably didn't think it through enough to realize it is more serious when you encounter some of these people. I kind of had homeless in mind, and that's what most people perceive. But I do realize some of them, it is a business, and it is serious, and they do a lot more, which I didn't realize they'd done pimping.
They do, yeah.
But if that's the case, and it is that serious, and I think it is, and it is a crime, let's fund, like I say, I'm serious about this. Let's fund something additional. The sheriff insist that these ordinances are carried out and enforced, and let's get them out of here back to Mobile or where they came from.
Commissioner Robinson.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to, at least from this standpoint, move forward a couple items. One, that we get this, that at the next board meeting, we have the open container ordinance brought back to us with these amendments that the county attorney is looking at. But the county attorney... Can
I at least ask that we do it the second meeting so we can meet our advertising deadlines?
Whatever needs to legally happen. So whatever needs to... My motion is whatever needs to legally... I'm not going to sign a certain meeting to whatever legally needs to happen to make that happen. That we also in there direct you to make sure that we're not going to create any problems on Pensacola Beach on the places that we are looking to not have issues, that be whatever you need to do correctly in your motion to make that happen in the ordinance. Two, that we create prohibition zones within a half-mile east-west of 110, north-south of all intersections of I-10, and that we come forward with a funding amendment to the budget for $60,000 for a deputy that would be assigned to do nothing more than address panhandling in all these different areas, and that we work with the sheriff to ask that be moved forward. And I put that forward as a motion for us to evaluate.
I'll second it with one comment. Why can't we take Joe's recommendation and make this a countywide ordinance?
You cannot. There is a constitutional protection for panhandling. We've run into this problem before. You can only do designated areas when there are legislative findings that demonstrate why. Some of the places where it has been allowed have been things like historic preservation areas in a county or Fort Lauderdale's beach area, for example, but you cannot do it just blanket across the board.
I believe interstate entrance ramps are essential for where that's coming out there and the businesses is being conducted. The hearing, the testimony we've heard today, you've also referenced anecdotal things that have happened on Pine Forest. So I think from this standpoint, we just move forward within the prohibition of that was moved.
And I can support that, Commissioner May.
Yes, if there's a motion second, I know there's a little discussion. And I guess this prohibition will be in line with what is already state statute, Madam Counsel, and nothing will cause us to find ourselves in legal problems with conflict, correct?
There are 3 different types of laws that we're looking at here. There is already a state statute on loitering and loitering type activities.
We're not touching loitering.
Right, and I'm kind of advising you guys stay away from that, in part because there are already state laws, and secondly because that can raise a lot of constitutional claims, and I'd rather keep us away from those. You already have an open container ordinance. It's just pretty narrow, and we're advising that you can beef that up significantly. Obviously, we'll do that in coordination with a conversation with the Island Authority. And then the other thing, which is the aggressive panhandling, which is an ordinance you guys already have on the books. You also have a roadway safety ordinance, which prohibits people going onto the road beds and the medians.
Right. No,
Those
this
are
will
local.
conflict with it. It would all coincide and not conflict, right? With the new-
Hopefully, yes.
Hopefully. And that's fine. And panhandling is a very bad issue in my district as well. So I share those concerns, and I certainly will support the funding, and I will support it. But I'll support it with reservations, and I'll support it with I'll be coming back to Access Board for a budget amendment. I've had over 12 murders in Escambia County that have happened in each one of our districts, and the sheriff doesn't have a narcotics unit, and all these have been drug related, and he doesn't have the funding to put the cops on the street. And we've had more deaths related to drug activity in our district in the last 12 months. And although panhandling is very significant, it's not the loss of life that we've experienced here in the last 12 to 14 months. So I would support it, but I certainly will be coming forward to ask for money to make sure that we get a narcotics unit, which is absent in Escambia County, which is contributing to crime. So I hope that will be a consideration of that if we're going to do a budget amendment for panhandling, that we also would do a budget amendment to address the narcotic problems that we have, and that the sheriff has explained he doesn't have the money to put those units on the street.
Commissioner Robertson.
You mean we don't have a special narcotics unit in this county? See, I was relating my theory of a unit, at least one, strictly for panhandling. I thought surely we had units for...
There was a unit, I believe, that was disbanded relatively recently. That
The TAC unit was disbanded, and so when we're talking about this, it's a lack of funding, a lack of deputies. And so if we're going to fund to do a special task force for panhandling, I certainly would think that we would spawn a special unit to look at the...
I concur with that. I didn't know we didn't have one.
Commissioner Underhill.
But thank you.
I heard the sheriff speak on this issue, especially separating out the issue of the organized crime related to that's hiding within our homeless problem. And I know that he and a number of his deputies are actually very smart on this issue, particularly with regard to how it affects the gang issue as well. Perhaps it would be best that whatever action we take today, we leave the door open enough just by simply saying that we are prepared to help with additional funding, but not specifically tell the sheriff how to crack the egg.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Yep.
Commissioner Robinson.
That's fine, and I can amend. I think the point you brought up is right there. I mean, the lady's telling you there's prostitution going on in the McDonald's restroom on Davis Highway. There are issues that are happening already related to the organized essential lawlessness that's occurring on Davis Highway. So my point is, I see this individual being more than just panhandling. If they begin to address these certain areas, I think we begin to push some of this stuff out, and I think it has a much broader impact one way or other, and it may reach into those areas. I certainly take off just to say panhandling, but I think the issue is we want to put something in there to begin to address aggressively what is happening, and I think it will have a spillover into law enforcement across in what we've got, but we need to do something to address these issues.
Well, my second's okay with pulling out any specific amount, if that's what you're saying.
Commissioner May.
No, thank you, Commissioner Underhill, because I think a lot of this panhandling is related to gang activity and drugs. I mean, many other people out there are selling drugs, so I like that. That's a much broader and fair approach.
But is the consensus of the board that we instruct Madam Council to go ahead with the advertising for the public meeting to move on this part as it relates to our legislative things, and then just knowing that we're going to be engaging with law enforcement
And bring forward an estimated amount that we need to talk about, because there's no point in having all these ordinances if you're not going to fund aggressively pursuing them and writing tickets, arresting them, and getting into this crime.
Commissioner Robbins, were you going to say something?
Yeah, Yeah, I think at some point in the next couple of meetings, we need to have that discussion as to what it takes to fund it and begin to get some funding done for it.
Well, we'll kind of propose this, and we have made it through the agenda relatively on time, and we'll certainly have everybody out for the Christmas lunch at the road camp. But we were trying to identify a date in February for a workshop. There was a pretty expensive report that was coming back from our contractor or professional services person on mass transit, and that report is due back in January. If it would be the will of my colleagues, while we still mark that day, maybe push the mass transit oriented workshop to March, and have the workshop, that window in February, be a discussion about some more extensive law enforcement type issues, if that's the will of y'all. And I will say, with whether it be on those workshop days or today, unless you overwhelmingly are against this, as you have folks, I'll use today as an example, with there being 2 folks from Grover's community that I think you certainly notified would be, the discussion was here, and asked for them to speak. I will, from my point of view, anyone that any of you invite to come and be a resource for our discussion, even if it's during a committee of the whole or a workshop, I'm going to be happy to have them give input. I respect all of your opinions, and all I would ask in that, in the same way that we've been respectful of Grover, of a couple of people that can lend to that discussion today, that you be respectful of your colleagues as you invite folks, and but anyone that you bring and you want to hear from and you think would be valuable, then I'm certainly going to support given the opportunity to speak. So,
Fine with me.
okay. Madam Counsel, is that clear direction for us?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
can I
ma'am.
say
I'm sorry,
just
Ms.
one more
Beck.
thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that what we've seen escalate, the longer that we take to do something about this, someone's going to get hurt. Because the guests that are leaving, so many people are armed today in their cars, and they're frightened, and it's dark or it's light or whatever. As they get approached, they're very frightened. Someone's going to get hurt.
Thank you, Ms. Buck.
Thank you.
We didn't take action or vote on the, even a straw vote on instructing Madam Counsel to go ahead and move forward with the aggressive panhandling ordinance.
We had a second, a motion.
Okay, we just didn't vote. So if we would, all those in favor of doing that, please raise your right hand. Seeing 5, it passes 5-0. Thank you, Liz.